Welcome to Redundancy Matters with me, June Hogan. I'm a qualified career coach and an outplacement specialist, and I've got a background in HR. This is the podcast where I help HR professionals and leaders managing redundancies to put people at the heart of the process. In today's episode, I'm joined by coach, author and change consultant Eleanor Tweddell. I've been a fan of Eleanor's since her first book, so it felt really special to have her on my podcast talking about her next book, Another Door Opens. We talk about the messiness of change and what really happens and how it feels, and how we can support others while also taking care of ourselves. Eleanor shares her own experience of change, and she introduces her 5-step framework from her new book. We chat about why taking time to pause matters, why change never runs in a straight line, and how leaders and HR teams can bring honesty, care, and even a bit of creativity to the change process. It's a really open conversation, and I hope you'll take away some practical ideas and reassurance that you're not alone in the messiness of change. And if you want to go deeper into managing redundancies, you'll find the link in the show notes to register for a free monthly lunch and learn session, where my colleague Robin and I explore different aspects of managing redundancies. And you'll also find lots of resources on my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome to today's episode of Redundancy Matters, and I'm delighted to be joined by Eleanor Tweddell. Eleanor is a coach, an author and a change consultant, and I'm delighted to have her on the episode today. We're going to be talking about her new book, which is fantastic, and also navigating change and how as HR professionals we can do that by supporting ourselves, by supporting leaders and supporting others through it. So thanks so much for joining me today, Eleanor.
Oh, thank you, June. Big fan of you. I'm so very excited to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I am also a fan and have your other book as well. And it's super nice to think that we're connecting here. Really lovely to be chatting today. So do you just want to introduce yourself? That was a very brief introduction from me, but just introduce yourself to everyone.
Yes. So I guess in a nutshell, 21 years of in-house, mostly internal comms, mostly in that space. Although I actually started in sales and operations and somehow got into internal comms as we do. And then I was made redundant actually from a leadership development role at Vodafone. I was running the graduate program around about 8 years now. From that point, it got me curious about, you get to a certain stage in life when you think, okay, now what? You know, redundancies happened. I actually was loving my job at the time. I loved running the graduate program. And so it wasn't as easy as, oh, I was done with it anyway. And that's why I started writing a blog about it to explore. I was talking out loud on my blog about what if you get made redundant from a job you really loved, but you can't really go back into it. But now what? So that's where then the book came from, the first book, which was Why Losing Your Job Could Be the Best Thing That Ever Happened to You. Because I was trying to find a way through that I wasn't all of the emotions that you talk about, June, feeling resentful, feeling angry, all that stuff, trying to get through all that and find a positive outcome for myself, which led me to set up my own little business and write and explore and do all sorts of different projects based on that curious mind of what if I could make this a good thing. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, fantastic. And yes, big fan of the first book, and I have it on my recommended reading list for people who are navigating redundancy, and this new book will be going on it as well. So you've had personal experience of redundancy, and through your work you've supported individuals and organizations through that kind of whole change process. So why does redundancy matter to you?
So it probably links directly into that title of how can it be the best thing that ever happens to you? Because I feel like it feels so painful at the time. And it links into my second book to a degree. I remember being made redundant, sitting at the desk with a lot of people who had also just got the news, and somebody coming up to the table we were sat at and said, when one door closes, another door opens. It can be so much better than you will ever feel right now. And it came from the right place, but wrong timing. Like we all just were like, yeah, don't need to hear that crap at this moment in time. And off they disappeared. I think they were actually an HR person at the time. Anyway, it came from the right place, just wrong time. But it got me really interested in that because I was like, that was heartfelt, but we were all quite angry about it. So redundancy matters because I feel like it can be it's such a sensitive moment in time. There's a lot of emotions that come with that. And so this work you do, and I guess what I talk about in the book as well, is just embracing that a bit more and recognizing humans are messy. And so that's why it matters. It's a moment in time that can really redirect the rest of your life. Like what happens next? It's important not to just dismiss it as, oh, it happens to everyone. It happens to you and you can own what happens next.
It's really interesting when you say there about the right message, but the wrong time in terms of how that landed with you. Those sorts of statements, which again, they're well-meaning, of course they are, but it's the timing of them, isn't it?
Oh, completely. And as a comms person who spends a lot of time sequencing comms and landing the right message, exactly, I'm probably hypersensitive to these things. But yeah, it matters, as your podcast says, how we talk about it to each other and the space that we create for each other in these moments can really make a difference. And I say, look, the best advice is don't say anything. Like just create space for people, I think, at that moment in time, because people are processing. So you don't have to jump in with a big fat cliche, which, you know, in the first book, it's cliche bingo. We literally, how many cliches have you got coming at you at one point in time? You don't have to do that. You can just hold space for someone who's just lost their job and allow them to process and just say, I'm here if you want to talk out loud. I think that's the best gift you can give someone.
Yeah, that gift of being listened to and valued. Yes, cliche bingo. I remember that from the first book.
And we definitely don't want to hear about the neighbor's husband's cousin who got also made redundant and blah blah blah. That's what often happens, isn't it? Anything happens to us in life and we share it with someone, we hear our reaction. Oh yeah, so blah blah happened to them. Don't care.
And that notion of, and they found a job really quickly. That's even
Oh,
oh, the
good for
pressure.
them.
There's a lot there. And you mentioned there about the messiness
Yeah.
of change and exploring the framework. Change is messy, and it's something that I share with people. I remember early on being in a group workshop, and I do use the change curve. I think it's helpful for people to understand what they might be going through. And then I have another kind of slide that's just like this ball of knitting, which is that change curve looks nice and smooth, but this is what you might be going through. And someone said, how long will it take me to get through that? And of course, I went into discussion about it's an individual journey, but helping people to understand that change is messy. And as HR professionals and people listening to the podcast, we're in the middle of that in a sense, in that we understand it's going to be messy, but often the leadership team are looking to the HR team to have everything worked out in that way. So from your experiences when you've been working with organizations, with restructures, how can we be better at embracing the messiness or being prepared for the messiness of change, would you say?
I think you've just nailed that one in terms of just calling it and labeling it. But the knitting basket that you just described there, which I love that image, is a blue ball of wool for the employees you're trying to support. It's a pink neon. I don't know why I've called it neon, but let's go with that for yourself. And then the leaders are perhaps some sort of beige, maybe. It's mixed and it's got knots in it, and they're all like visually, that is actually what you've got as a professional sitting in the middle of it. And to pretend that it's that smooth, beautifully knitted, finished scarf is ridiculous. It can be, and you can work it all out, but let's just call it and acknowledge that it's got knots and it's twisted and it's a bit sticky. And I think sometimes people don't acknowledge that, and we want everything on a Gantt chart. We want everything on a project. Tick the milestone boxes. Has the comms gone? Has the processes been tick box done? Yes, of course, that's part of it, but acknowledge there's messiness. There's a lot of emotions that can't be put through a Gantt chart or a process, or anything on an intranet could not help. And that's okay. Let's not fight it, just acknowledge it. So I play with that to a degree, that the first stage is acknowledgement and knowing that we can't fix everything. And it's probably not your job to fix everything as well. It's okay to have that basket that's a little bit messy at the moment.
And so that notion of the mess, which comes before the pause. So do you just want to talk us through the framework that's in the book? Just talk us through that, and then we'll dig into how that might show up when you're leading a change program as a HR professional.
Yeah, so one of the things I started looking at is interesting hearing people think about this framework now, because I actually started mapping it out years ago, working on a transformation program for an organization, and I'm mostly in comms, an element of learning space. So I map out from that, like, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? Why is something still not working? Because I've done this for a long time now. Like, I've done this for 20 years. Things are still the same, going wrong. What is going on? So I started mapping out change. And like you, we've all got these beautiful models, the change curve and all it caught. We all know this good stuff. And yet we still keep seeing the same errors. So I mapped it out. And what I thought I saw was we never stop. We never build stop into a transformation change in our lives, let alone work. So all we do is just build and build on the change. So the very first step is pause, to get people to think about stopping and pausing in a different way. So when I talk to organizations about that, they kind of go, we ain't got time for that. Read any productivity book. The top people who talk about this stuff, they build in rest, they build in recovery, they build in thinking time. So pause, the book is exploring what pause means to you. It's not saying we all go off on holiday for 3 weeks and forget about things. It's not that. It might be that, but it's actually more having a different relationship with creating time to take a step out and look around and think what's happening. And then you can then step back in with a bit more intention and you get to results better. So that's the first step. And then the second step is messy, which we just touched on there, which is opening up. Once you've created space to think, you're gonna have to get a bit uncomfortable. You're gonna have to embrace that stuff of, oh, things are changing for me too, and I might not be handling this very well. And I saw that lots. Project managers, for example, leading big projects, and they are at risk themselves. Worked with HR and comms people who've been at risk themselves. And they're not allowing themselves to process. They just keep going, like some sort of martyr at some point. And then it crashes. And you think, what was the point of that? So it's having this relationship of we've all got to somehow, for the sake of doing change, we've got to pause and we've got to embrace the mess. So that's the two first steps that I encourage people. And it's the most important too, because you have to get them in place. Otherwise, you're just operating on sands.
Yeah, and that notion of getting people to pause and slow down, I can imagine, certainly from my experience, people would just look at you like you were crazy. We've got to deliver this by X date. You're suggesting we need to just slow down. What's that all about? But when you mentioned about stepping back, I was thinking about that notion of having perspective in terms of what you're about to be, what are you going into, what are you about to be entering into from that perspective, not just what is the organization about to change, but how are you as leaders and as HR professionals, how are you going to, as you say, kind of embrace things, and how are you going to start really and setting those foundations? And so what does that look like in practice then? So if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, yeah, I've been told by the CEO or whoever, changes on the horizon, we're going to need to make a 10% reduction in the workforce, change the way we do things, whatever it might be. How am I going to encourage them to take a step back to start with? What would be some advice you might give?
One of the things I'm exploring further and further, and I'm always in a sort of explore mode. I don't think we ever get to a point of knowing, this is it, done. But one of the things I feel is, first of all, that relationship of change in an organization. We've actually got change around us all the time. And it's a weird notion when you start thinking about it that, oh, change is coming in the organization. So it starts here and it ends there. Is that change? I think that's just probably project management. We get a bit confused with project management and change. Change is actually with us all the time. Look at what's going on in the world. How can that not affect work? Look at what's going on in your life. Life changes are coming at us. We're growing old for a start. So we're constantly living in change. So actually having a different relationship with change is a huge game changer from the very beginning. So that's probably the first thing that I would say. We're actually just have a different relationship with it. You might have projects coming up, which are bigger impact on people than some others, but that's what it is. Change is more around this kind of behavioral shifts and acknowledgement of things that transform something from here to there. So that's the first thing to play with. And then, yeah, don't hesitate to think about things. I just don't see people thinking. Like, think about your work, June. Like, you brought in to help people think, really.
Mm.
And that's amazing. Like, it's amazing because usually they're just doing. And the book embraces that and gets people to, okay, I'm a doer. I just get busy rather than taking time out to think. But you can actually do busy thinking. So if you are a doer and you have to be always like producing something, fine, be aware of that. But always create time to think and think, what am I doing? How is this affecting me? How is it showing up? Because then we can be a bit more self-aware in our work. And I see it all the time. People haven't processed properly and they leak all over the place. That's where tension comes from. It's where misunderstandings come from. It's where burnout, I think, eventually probably comes from because we're not taking a step out to think about ourselves and not acknowledging how important that is. So that's my curiosity around it, but I'm pretty sure you have observations as well in that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that in terms of the relationship. It's not just something that is a project that you can connect with the fact that change is inevitable, as we all know. And you mentioned before about working with colleagues who are also themselves at risk. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do. You know, you've got your own challenges through this process, and yet, quite rightly, you have to be professional and still deliver until, in some cases, turn the lights out if you're closing down a business. So that kind of compartmentalizing, I've worked with line managers who, through outplacement and also when I was managing change, who, in order to do the best for the individual during that process, they had to just shut off what was going on for them. So, with that notion of if you've got people who are going through their own challenges as a result, and it might not be maybe that you're at risk yourself, but that your department's going to look completely different. There's going to be half a number of people, or you're going to be expected to do a different job. I guess there's a lot of that going on. So people are running, if you like, two processes. How, in your experience, how can people best do that for themselves?
Yeah. So the first thing is to get to know yourself in that space. And maybe it depends how you operate. Some people might have to do that, divide it up and shut it out. But I would still challenge that a bit because it slips into being a martyr. I'm just going to be very, I'll say the worst case scenario to give us the thought. But I do see martyrs that do that and they're striving to do this and this. But actually, if I get a moment to have a little chat, it could actually be distraction because they don't want to think, they're scared to think about themselves. So actually, it's really convenient to put it all on, oh, I'm doing this for my team, I'm doing it for the best, blah, 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 blah. And actually, so you've got to take responsibility quite early on for yourself because you're not responsible to help someone. You're not. And it's a really hard thing to do. I've made people redundant and kind of tried to fix the world for them. And actually, do people even want that? If you're the person that's just said, unfortunately, you've lost your job, they probably don't want that from you. They want to disconnect and they want to move on. And they're now starting their own change story, their own version of what happens next. So, what are you actually doing? Is it about them? Is it about you? This is the messy bit. It's very uncomfortable. And then they do the convenient, oh, yes, I have to do this. This is part of my job. And I would challenge it and say, is it? Or are you just getting busy and ignoring this has a massive impact for you? Because at some point it's going to come and sweep your feet. And you're going to have some serious coaching from June. And June's going to say, yeah, we should have been thinking about this maybe a few months ago. So I think taking responsibility early on, you have to embrace this and start honest conversations together is really important. Being really honest, like the best people I've seen have said, this, I'm finding this a bit hard too, being very honest. I'm going through stuff. But let's try and work out how I can best support you, how we can get things done if we need to, but let's be in this together. It's really tough, but I think that's where I see how the best people do it. They're not shutting off and pretending it's not for them. They're stepping in.
Yeah. So having that connection, and that there's a level of vulnerability in that as well as a leader who previously people would have been looking up. You've got all the answers, haven't you? You're here to guide me. You're here to take me through this. But actually, they're going through it themselves. So you've taken the pause as a HR professional leading change. You've taken the pause. You've asked people to stop, to take that step back. You've made them aware that this could get difficult in lots of different ways. Some of the things we've talked about, the emotion of change and how the Gantt chart doesn't necessarily paint the whole picture. And then the third part of your framework is play, which I found really interesting to have that in a change framework. So talk to us about play and how, again, if you're leading change, you can help others to embrace that as a notion.
Yeah. So when we've got into that uncomfortable space and we're full of resistance, and we're probably quite, and leaders will do this as well. We'll probably, your HR audience, they'll be thinking, yeah, I saw the leader completely shutting down and not pretending this was about their identity and making it all about the organization. So we're in that messy part and it's really hard to get out of it. Once you've opened that up and you're feeling uncomfortable and vulnerable and sharing, it's difficult. We get a bit stuck. So one of the things I heard myself saying again and again, I was working on a transformation program from a comms point of view, and I kept hearing myself saying, look, why don't we just play with a couple of ideas, try and help this part and see what happens? Or let's just come up with a few scenarios of possibilities that make us feel a bit better and go from there. Because it was I couldn't get them to a space of planning a beautiful next action. Like I just couldn't, it was a couple of years ago and I just remember thinking, oh, because we kept on going back to, oh, this is going on and blame this and blame that. We were still stuck in the mess, but right at the start of the mess, not even starting to process. So I thought, okay, I introduced play as let's not blame anyone. We've got a blank sheet now to the future. We're turning to a new door that's going to open. What if this could be good? Let's just play with that. So that's what I heard myself saying. So that's why I wrote that at that moment, because you get stuck in the mess and you can't see a way out. You can't think about a beautiful, perfect plan. Play with ideas. What if this could be good for me? What if I can find solution? What if I can do this really well? What if I can feel good about this? So it's playing more with more positive questions and shifting you into that. And the chapter, as you're probably experiencing, is a little bit random. It's throwing all kinds of stuff because, it's getting people to think in corners you perhaps wouldn't. Instead of just seeing the inevitable and feeling like change is being done to you and it's all doom and gloom, play lifts you out of that and starts you to see a different version of what it could be, but without having to have an answer. So that's what play is about.
And that notion that I'm just imagining being in a room and, you've got some leaders around you and just giving them that freedom to imagine what could be possible. And I guess think about the vision and how it could look for them. And of course, some of that might not be possible, but you're opening up the mind and you're getting people to think about possibilities. I imagine that could be really quite playful, but also freeing in a sense, because you're getting people to think about things more than, again, past the Gantt chart.
People hate it, by the way. I'm not going to pretend that this is a great. So in that scenario, if you do play with this framework to get people talking, it's a nice framework to get people talking about change. You get to this part of play, and I actually thought this would be the energizer bit. That's actually how I design it, because it gets people energized. Like what you said, June, it's like the uplifting bit of shoulders drop and you go, maybe this could be. And in the chapters I write about, come on, let's be ridiculous. Let's be rebellious. Everything that's going on for us right now, that we are holding ourselves into this space of what it is, let's get a bit impractical, because we're in a play space, so we're allowed. The resistance is real. It's very funny at the beginning. So that's when you're more likely to have people say, I haven't got time for this. The finance director will probably fold their arms and not take part for a while. But it's fine. That's all fine. That's for them. It's not for you as an HR person or comms or anybody running it. They have to work for this, but I can guarantee at some point it clicks and they go. And sometimes people have driven home and sent me a message and said, I was playing with that idea of blah, 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 and thinking about it in the car. So sometimes I'm fully aware that this stuff has a lot of resistance in it, but it's mapped out from seeing change happen in an organization, but using that sort of language. So yeah, play is such a great one to explore. You don't have time not to do it.
Yeah. And that notion that positioning it as something that for people who are more reflective, that it might just be about generating ideas and you're not looking to solve anything. And
Have more questions than answers is completely fine.
yeah,
But people feel so uncomfortable because we're so programmed, especially in a corporate environment, we're so programmed to have answers, to have exact stuff. It's ridiculous because the world is never like that. Our lives are never like that. So it's a crazy notion, but we're so pre-programmed, but we've got to just know it's a default and actually play just can give us the best moments, the best innovation, the best creativity. So yeah, and allow yourself to play.
yeah, fantastic. And so opening up that space, opening up those ideas, just getting people thinking, and however you choose to do that. And then, of course, the next part of your framework is actually to try, experiment, to see what's out there, see what's possible. How can you, if you said there's some resistance to play, how can you then, okay, try sounds a bit more practical. We're going to try some stuff, but giving people permission to fail is one of those aspects in order for it to work. So how can this be framed in a way to bring the leadership team with you when you're talking about trying?
Yeah. So again, try is a good one to really sit with, to understand your relationship with. A lot of us think that achievement and success is the end. In that space of change, it'll be like, oh, change is a success when we've got X, Y, Z and the vision. And I work in with companies to try and create strategic visions. But let's not forget all of the processes and behavioral shifts and all of the little milestones we've got to achieve to get there. And then we all know when we get there, it moves again. In fact, most organizations never get to their vision because it keeps moving. I've worked for one organization where I've had a vision party. When I worked for Costa Coffee a very long time ago, we wanted to sell 1.7 million cups of coffee a day or something like that. And we got there and we had a vision party. That's the only organization I've ever experienced actually achieving a vision and celebrating it. Everyone else, it keeps shifting. So let's have a different relationship with trying. Try is just the joy of trying. So you're right, June. It's what's the steps we can make? What's the milestone? So we've played with an idea. What if we take one of those things and actually try it? And it's really practical, the chapter. It brings out some of the sort of frameworks that we all know about, like design thinking, like TRIZ, like Scamba. I brought them out as real practical tools because that's essentially what they're doing. And they're in a moment of, you don't really see them in a moment of change, but they're classic. If you bring in some design thinking to have a go at an idea that's come up, and you can either do it on a personal level, so you're just going to try and you think, what if I approach this a bit differently? I'm going to try this. Great. Or it might be a team. Look, we've played with this. How about we try this a bit differently? We put in meetings in a different rhythm. We try and do something a bit. We do comms a bit different. We talk about things a bit different. What does try look like? And you set it up with full sort of accountability that we're in the try space. So as you just said, things might work, things might not, but we're here to evolve and keep it moving to get to the final step, which is restart, which is where we take full ownership. We're very intentional and we're a bit more in that space of confidence of, yeah, this is how I want to show up. So on an individual level, it's full ownership of that. And then on a team level, it's, yeah, we tried some things that didn't quite work, but this is working. Let's own it. Now we put it in the plan. Now we build a strategy from it. And it's getting to that stage. So that's why I interrupted the flow from play to restart. And a few people, including the editor at the time, were like, really? What? Try? I was like, no, because it's another important step. Taking small steps, making things feel achievable. You're still in a little bit of experimental stage, but with a little bit more intention. I just think it helps to move things on with the right conversation around it. So rather than us just getting right to the end, which is the start in my book, and going, this is the vision, this is where we're going, you have to take people on that journey. So that's what that's about.
Yeah. And I like how you frame that it could be on an individual level or at an organizational level. And I guess depending on what kind of stage you're at in terms of a change program, I was just thinking then about that notion of when you're already in consultation, so you're in redundancy consultation and you're listening to proposals and ideas and suggestions that are coming forward at collective meetings or individually, and encouraging people to have an open mind, what we're going to do is we're going to go and try. We're going to go and see if that could, showing that willingness to do that. And I guess going back to the second stage of the process, it might be a bit messy. It might not work. We might get it wrong, but being open to it and being open to possibilities. And I think from the perspective of, say, if you are in a redundancy consultation setting, having an open mind is hugely important, because that's the whole point of consultation, is to avoid redundancies and to be open to ideas and suggestions and things that you can try and see if that might help to save, even if it's just one job, then that is hugely important.
Yeah. And can you imagine if you could explain that? Because we both know, like, we're in this space where we see it. I feel most employees think, and unions probably think, consultation is just a gimmick. It's just a sort of tick. They're not really going to listen to us or change their minds. It's a done deal. They just have to go through this because it's policy, law, whatever they're applying to it. That's how I sometimes feel. And so you imagine the opportunities that are missed in that moment. Whereas if you can have that opportunity to say to people, here's a framework that we can work through to help us think about this because we mean it. Imagine the cultural shift there. Oh, God, they really do want us. I worked in an organization, I was the manager, and we had to all take a certain amount. Everyone's got to take 10% off the budget. You find it. And most people just made people redundant. And I gathered my team up and said, we've got to do this. How should we do it? And we didn't really have a lot of budget. People never have a lot of budget. So it was like, all right, that's not an option. It's going to have to be a role. And we came up with, why don't we all drop a day? We were very ahead of our time. This was a long time ago. But we did 4-day week and we planned it all out so the team would all be covering and nobody lost their job. And we all did it. I did it. The whole team did it. And we were playing with the idea. I said, if anyone wants to go, great, voluntary, let talk, but no one did. So let's find a way that none of us go. And it was amazing. Then a year later, we all got reinstated to full time because they were like, oh, we need you. But it was that chance to think, actually, I don't need to just jump into this final, it's a done deal. Who's going? What if I can play? And what if we can try and see how it goes? If it's not working, fine. But yeah, so, it's real. It's real.
Yeah, oh, that's a wonderful story, hearing that, in terms of let's think about how we can do things differently, and really plays to that framework, as you say, with that notion of keeping an open mind. And so part 5 is about the restart.
Yeah.
So this is, phew, here we are. We've got to the end, which is never the end.
Yeah.
Another one just comes along. So tell us about the restart and how that can really be embraced as part of this final stage in the process.
Yeah, the start at the end is the feeling that you are ready to take full ownership. You stop with the blame, you stop with the distractions, because we've gone through this process now. You've got messy, you've embraced yourself, you've got to know yourself better as an individual, as a team, as an organization. You've embraced that, you've played with the ideas, and we've tried. So now we own it, and we own everything about it. And we now know how to have messy conversations, and we now know how to do this. So it's almost like the part you step in to fully own and stop blame and stop looking back, and you now look fully forward. And it's a short chapter, actually, because I didn't want to go on about it. I actually wrote, I think, about 40,000 words for that last part because I had so much to say. And then I was like, no, when you're at this point, it's just get on with it, but choose to own it. You're choosing this, you're owning it, you're being very intentional. For an organization, it's part of strategy. Now we're fully in this space of, we're in the moment of change. This is what's happening, and this is how we go forward. So that's where we want to get to. I think that, again, people get a bit stuck sometimes, and we've obviously got survivors, as they call it, who are left behind when there's been redundancies. And having that narrative of, we've all gone through this process and we can all be messy, not just people who've been affected, everybody. We can all play with possibility. We've all tried, but now let's own this, because we have to get back on track. We have to build this out to make it something great and achieve our goals and vision, whether it's a team or an organization. So that's what that is about. It's knowing what you're going to say yes to, what you're going to say no to, but full ownership, enough of excuses and all that kind of stuff. So that's where you want to get to. But you're right, Jean, you said it before. You might have to pause again. We all have to take moments out, step out. Does this feel right? It never ends. but it's just that you have full agency. I think that's what it's about for me.
And that notion that, I guess, goes back to the start in a sense, that there are consistent messages that have been running through all of this, even in the messy bits, even when you're doing the visioning and the play and you're trying, but so that when you get to restart, people can connect back with what was the point of all of this? Have we been true to what we set out to do? Have we been true to our values? Have we really, as you say, shown up during the process as we wanted to? And I guess that part of feeling accountable for whatever the end looks like and taking that ownership, and for those people who might not be, from an organisational perspective, and knowing how to spot when somebody might not be fully in the restart phase and probably maybe still back further down the line. If things aren't restarting as you might want them to, and I've had experience of this, what might you as a HR professional do to be able to try and make this as best as you can?
Yeah, and it's a really good point because we all have a different change story going on. Like it will look so messy if we mapped out everybody's change journey. Like some people, they're over the line, they've positive pants, they're off and they're loving the new stuff. Other people still in resistance, still grumbling about the old days. A lot of those people are in that resistance because they know they're going to have to make a call and they're going to have to decide, do I stay or go? And that's really hard. It might not be as articulated for them, but they know this place is no longer for me. The thing I'd say avoid, which I do get asked, I've had asked more times than, or even heard more times than is comfortable, is this: no leader should ever be like, right, we've got to this point now. You're either on the bus or you're off the bus. Let's avoid that. But I think it's still acknowledging this is where we are, this is who we are, this is how I support, and this is where the leadership piece really fits in. If the leaders worked on themselves and they've acknowledged, I have to change, I have to do things differently along with you, and people can see that, then you get a huge shift. That's huge. So you will get a shift, and there might still be people in the resistance space. That falls into two categories then. It's either a performance issue, and it's a very practical performance issue. This is new world. This is how we do things. You're not performing from a very practical, tactical point of view. Or it's a conversation about maybe this just isn't you anymore. How can we help you? Is there a different opportunity? And I sometimes see that being skipped, and we don't help managers to have that messy conversation or to understand the difference. I see opportunities being missed because we jump straight into performance management when actually it's maybe, look, is there something different that we can do, because this doesn't feel like it's working. So it never ends, the conversation, but it goes into everyday performance like we would every day. Keep sharing how you're changing as a leader. Get all the leaders to share how the challenges, and get some challenges for people to share and try and create and solve together as well. Most of the time people have answers to the problems as well. They're not stupid. People aren't stupid who work in organizations. They get frustrated when they don't get heard. So start listening to people and going, okay, what do you think? How can we solve this? So bring people into the conversation. I know this all sounds very realistic, but you do see it sometimes happening. And you think, oh, if that was just a different conversation, slightly different conversation, that would have been so much more powerful. I think I totally get it's really hard times. And there's some just practical stuff sometimes, but I also think there's just slight shifts that in that space of owning and knowing where we're going can really help bring people with it. Or they will decide it's not for me, and that's fine. Don't make people feel awful if it's not for them even anymore. That's okay as well. I've seen organizations like, oh, they're leaving, this is a disaster. And it's like, no, it's not. They've just decided it's not for them anymore. It's fine. We're fine with that. So yeah, it's that.
And again, you might get to the end and there might still be some possibilities that people are going to be making you aware of, in terms of, we thought this was how this change would land, but actually, can I just put forward a suggestion because I think this is something we could try? And I guess so the process almost starts again, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the point right at the beginning. I think change is an ongoing process. It isn't a thing on a project sheet. It just isn't. I call it change mastery. We all need to just be better at change because it's with us all the time, whether we like it or not. And sometimes we're great at it and sometimes we're not. But if we just can give ourselves the sort of credit that we can do things differently, we can see things differently, we can not get stressed and in the moment, and things can turn out good. Just those little thoughts can shift a whole way of how something feels. So yeah, it definitely comes back to that notion of change is a thing that happens. Everyone needs to know how to do change and how to have messy conversations which help you to get through together. So yeah, it's a notion that we all need to be constantly working on.
Absolutely fantastic. And I'll put all the links in the show notes to both of the books. Your new book, Another Door Opens, is 5 steps for navigating change in life and work. And as we've talked about, it can be applied on an individual level, or you can apply it at a team or organizational level. And so for anyone going through change, I would highly recommend it, along with your podcast, which is one of my faves as well. So how can people find you if they want to connect with you about any of this good stuff that we've been talking about?
Oh yeah, thanks, June. And yes, your podcast episode is listened to still. I guess people like try and search, oh my goodness, I'm having to go through redundancy in an organization and help. So they find you. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm Another Door is the company, but I'm on LinkedIn. Also, yeah, just drop me a message always to chat about these things, jump on a call and help in any way I can, even if it's just half an hour of downloading, which is what it usually is. I'm sure you're the same, June. People just need a vent sometimes because it's stressful, and the important part is not to take it personally. Like, it is not a personal thing if you're in an organization, and it's not on your shoulders to fix the world, but it is on your shoulders to look after yourself. So yeah, you want to chat about that, then drop me a note.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Eleanor. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. There's been so much in there that's going to be super useful. And yeah, thank you so much. It's been really interesting.
Thanks, June.
Thank you so much for listening to the Redundancy Matters podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful. It would mean a lot to me if you would follow, rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, as this helps it reach more people who are managing redundancies. Let me know what you thought, and if you have ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn, June Hogan, and get in touch via my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, where you'll also find more resources to help you manage redundancies. I hope you'll join me again soon for the next episode of Redundancy Matters.